Hello friends. Today my topic of discussion is Michel Foucault's another concept, biopolitics. In my previous video I have discussed Foucault's view on biopower. Let's begin today's video about biopolitics. A big new idea in human thinking is that people can control and change life using power and knowledge. This makes lives and living things part of fights for power. In the second half of the 90s, a big question came up. How can science change humans? In 1970s, a French thinker named Michel Foucault said, "This idea is called biopolitics." How can science change humans? It is the idea which Michel Foucault called biopolitics. Foucault learned from and expanded upon the research of his mentor, Georges Canguilhem, who studied science and biology. Biopolitics is very popular in social science research. The word biopolitics was first used by Rudolf Kesslen. It is about the connection between biology and politics. Biopolitics means when the government controls how life works. For example, the debates in the United States about women's rights related to reproduction shows biopolitics. Women's rights related to reproduction like abortion and birth control. And these rights show the biopolitics. Biopolitics is about controlling and improving human life through political and physical methods. Foucault's idea of biopolitics comes from his own concept of biopower, which I discussed in my previous video. Foucault talked about biopolitics for the first time in his lecture called Society Must Be Defended, which he delivered at Collège de France between 1975 and 1976. From 1971 to 1984, Foucault gave talks at the Collège de France. These talks covered a wide range of his studies and were casual and conversational. In biopolitics, he talks about how societies control life and power. Between final talk of Society Must Be Defended and concluding section of The History of Sexuality, Foucault describes his idea about biopolitics. Biopolitics is discussed in the last chapter of The Will to Knowledge. The Will to Knowledge is the first volume of History of Sexuality. Biopolitics is an intersectional field between human biology and politics. Foucault talked about biopolitics as a mix of biology and politics. It is about taking care of people's lives and the populations in certain areas. Foucault suggests that over time, focus shifted from considering individuals as bodies to considering them as whole species. This biopolitics involves managing birth and death rates, as well as studying and changing diseases. Foucault sees this as start of biopolitics because it is about dealing with population as a political and power-related issue. In simple words, it is like making sure life goes well, stays strong, and grows in order. It is a political wisdom taking into consideration the administration of life and a locality's populations as its subject. To quote Foucault, biopolitics is to ensure, sustain, and multiply life, to put this life in order. The concept is rebellion against capitalism, because capitalism uses life and the body as tools of protest. In Society Must Be Defended, Foucault talks about how in the early 60s, people started to see war as the constant foundation of all power institutions. It became a hidden part of society that could be understood by looking at history. Foucault explains that in the 80s, a significant change happened in political authority. The old way of having the power to decide about life or death was not completely replaced. Instead, a new power emerged that did not erase the old authority but blended with it. Foucault explored the notion of resistance, not in the negative sense, but as a way to create and recreate, transform and processes. He questioned how resistance impact new form of power relations and the power relation to change along with it. This is about having right power, or rather the complete opposite of what is right. Biopolitics is the ability to control life and allow death. Foucault says that after focusing on structure of the human body in 18th century, something different emerged towards end of that century, which was not about body anymore. Biopolitics is about how the government or rules control the lives of species and populations in an area. Laws and politics judge life based on what they think are unchanging and noticeable qualities. Foucault says biopolitics is about making sure life continues, stays strong, and increases. It is about organizing this life. In state racism, the permission to take a life is not a deviation from biopolitics. It is actually its standard practice. This situation, or rather this deadlock, where one person's death is directly tied to another person's life, shows Foucault's idea about state racism really well. This idea stayed as a thought based on positive thinking, not related to the time after World War II when people moved to Western countries, Europe, or the Occident. Instead, it changed into groups of migrants and people who were pushed aside and not given much importance from post-colonial times. This is link between the idea of race to people from a certain country, citizens, and those who are treated as less important. There is a difference between the way power was used for punishment and control and the new way power was being used to regulate things during the 80s alongside industrial capitalism. Foucault talked about the idea of state racism, where certain races were considered superior while others were seen as inferior. This was a way to divide the different groups of people in a population based on their race. This concept went beyond the usual understanding of racism. Racism recognized different racial groups and separated them from what was considered normal. This separation was the first purpose of racism, to create divisions in biological aspects controlled by biopower. The second purpose was a kind of warning that if you want to survive, you must be capable of killing. Foucault defined biopolitics as a new technology of power that operates at a different level and uses different tools. It is more than just a way to control behavior. According to him, it is a method of controlling an entire population like a global mass. Later, Foucault expanded these ideas in his lectures, The Birth of Biopolitics and The Courage of Truth. In 1976, when Foucault first introduced the concept, he provided several examples of how biopolitics is used to control society. These examples include things like the number of babies born compared to the number of people who die, how quickly a population is growing, and how many babies each person in a group has. He talked about how societies used different methods to control people, like using science or politics. In the past, diseases caused a lot of death, but things changed in the late 70s when science started looking at life differently. Foucault also compared this to how industries are growing and how power became important in the 1600s. With new medical advances like vaccines and medicines, fewer people were dying. This led to more careful and logical ways of managing things like insurance, saving money, and safety rules. Thank you very much. In my next video, I will discuss Foucault's view on body, Foucault's concept, Foucault's ideas on body. Hope to see you in the next video.